What would you do if you inherited not just a house, but a legacy, only to have your family try to take it all away? Iris Thompson had spent her life protecting her family's 80-year-old Victorian home, but after her parents' tragic death, the weight of the house along with its burdens fell entirely on her. Now, surrounded by a manipulative mother-in-law, a careless husband, and a demanding sister-in-law, Iris finds herself pushed to the breaking point. But in a dramatic twist, Iris discovers the power of her family's will, uncovering years of deceit and betrayal. Now it's time for Iris to reclaim what's hers, and she won't be silenced anymore. Stay tuned to see how Iris takes back control. My channel's struggling, so if you're intrigued, please comment 1 to help me out. Thank you for watching, I appreciate it. Subscribe to see how it ends, and I wish you all good health. Iris Thompson quietly climbed the worn stairs of her suburban Boston home, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. The 80-year-old Victorian mansion was more than just a house to her, it was a reflection of her life. As she reached out to touch the familiar wooden banister she'd known since childhood, a wave of warmth washed over her. It was as if her parents were still here, their presence lingering in the very walls of this place. This 4,000-square-foot house held her memories, her history, and every part of her. Smoothing her soft brown hair, Iris adjusted her understated navy suit. At 32, her modest wardrobe had remained unchanged since her college days, even as a senior accountant earning $85,000 a year at a large firm. There was no need for anything more. The memories this house held were enough. The soft, golden light of the setting sun streaming through the stained glass windows always reminded her of her mother's gentle smile. In the spacious garden, the roses she had planted with her father still bloomed proudly, untouched by time. Spending holidays tending to the garden and preparing family recipes passed down from her mother had been her greatest joys. "I'm home." The cold air greeted her as she opened the front door, the warmth of the house now a distant memory. She had returned from another long day at the firm at 6:00 p.m., and the once cozy family home now felt different, empty in a way. The $20,000 annual property tax, once shared by her parents, now rested squarely on her shoulders. Her parents were gone lost in a tragic car accident 2 years ago, and now every burden of this home fell to her. "Iris, working late again?" Her mother-in-law, Willow, peered out from the sitting room, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that couldn't mask the subtle distaste she held. Dressed to perfection in her elegant clothes, her makeup flawless and expensive jewelry gleaming, Willow's life had remained untouched by hardship. A former private school teacher, she now filled her days with bridge club and social events, her life comfortably funded by the generous insurance money she had received when her husband died 10 years ago. "Welcome back," came the echoing voice of her sister-in-law, Dahlia, from the second floor. Dahlia, a self-proclaimed beauty influencer with 20,000 social media followers, lived a lavish lifestyle despite being unemployed. Her extravagant monthly expenses, $5,000, were covered by monthly allowances of $3,000 from her brother, Rowan. Her credit card debt had already ballooned to over $30,000. Iris said nothing, silently heading to the kitchen. Married for 3 years without children, the atmosphere of her home had changed drastically in the past 6 months since her mother-in-law and sister-in-law moved in. Rowan, her husband, a successful architect running his own design firm with an annual salary of over $150,000, had become more and more absorbed in real estate development, coming home later and later. Known for his stylish businessman persona, his love for expensive watches, and his gentlemanly demeanor, his affection for his sister had become painfully obvious to everyone around them, while his attitude toward Iris had grown increasingly cold. The change had been subtle at first, but now it was undeniable. As she prepared dinner, Iris checked her phone. There was a message from her real brother Oak, a partner at a major Boston law firm, as co-executor of their parents' will. Oak was also an expert in real estate law and earned over $300,000 annually. "How are you? I'll call this weekend." The brief message brought a small smile to Iris's lips. Her intelligent and reliable brother had been calling her without fail every week since their parents passed away. He made time for her, even in the midst of his hectic work schedule. His kindness was a comfort, a reminder that there was someone who cared for her. From the kitchen window, she gazed out at the rose garden. This house, now valued at $2 million on the market, had once been an iconic presence in this upscale neighborhood. But recently, a wave of redevelopment had begun to sweep through, with old mansions being replaced by newly built condominiums. Property values were rising rapidly, attracting the attention of developers, and the fate of her beloved home seemed uncertain. After finishing dinner preparations, Iris sat alone at the dining table. Her mother-in-law and sister-in-law said they would eat in their rooms. A message from Rowan indicated he would be late again tonight. The dining table, once filled with family smiles, now belonged to her alone. The next day, she would again quietly handle household chores alone and head to work at 7:30 a.m. Even on holidays, her days were consumed by housework. How long would this routine continue? Though known for her mild temperament and patience, lately a quiet anxiety had begun to grow in her heart. Outside the window, the evening breeze gently swayed the rose petals. Her parents' promise, "Protect this house," still echoed quietly in her heart. Tonight, it was both their will and a pledge with her brother. However, recently, keeping that promise seemed to be becoming increasingly difficult. At 8 a.m. on a holiday morning, Iris was already in the kitchen. Today was her mother-in-law, Willow's birthday. To prepare a meal worthy of this special day, she had carefully selected the finest ingredients from the market the day before. Changed into an elegant new navy dress, Iris efficiently worked in the large kitchen. In the dining room, illuminated by crystal chandeliers, fresh flower centerpieces were already arranged, and antique dishes were beautifully set out. Her mother-in-law's favorite roast beef turned out perfectly. Iris nodded with satisfaction as she checked. By herself, she had carefully chosen the menu, considering her mother-in-law's preferences. The appetizer was lobster bisque, followed by Wagyu roast beef, grilled seasonal vegetables, and a special order birthday cake. She had prepared an expensive Bordeaux wine. "Ah, I'm hungry!" Near noon, Dahlia appeared in the kitchen, dressed in the latest fashion with perfect makeup. She took a drink from the refrigerator and said, "But I'm meeting friends for tea later, so I'll just have something light." Iris said nothing in response. She was already used to their indifferent attitude toward the meals she had spent an entire day preparing. "Well, well, aren't you quite the cook?" Willow came to check on things, giving a condescending look as she said, "But is the seasoning right? Do you know my preferences?" Iris just smiled silently, despite having asked about and studied her mother-in-law's preferences countless times. At 6 p.m., the party began. Under the crystal chandelier, silver cutlery gleamed on the antique table. Rowan came directly from work. Willow was dressed up in a new dress, and Dahlia arrived after shopping with friends. As the family gathered one by one, and then that moment arrived. Oh, the chairs! Iris looked around the table and felt something was off. 6 chairs, 7 place settings. What? There are enough seats for everyone, right? Dahlia said with a malicious smile. Her eyes didn't even try to hide their obvious hostility. "Oh, Iris, why don't you eat in the kitchen? You must be busy, right?" Willow said with an elegant smile. Her voice dripped with cruel triumph. Rowan sat down silently. His expensive watch coldly reflected the chandelier light. The room's atmosphere froze. Relatives wore confused expressions. Dahlia looked satisfied. Willow maintained her artificial smile, and her husband maintained an attitude of indifference, as if it were someone else's problem. Iris slowly straightened her back. Known for her mild temperament, at this moment her eyes held a strong will. "It seems I'm not considered family. Please excuse me." Iris spoke quietly but firmly. There was a strange strength in her voice. Back in her room, Iris immediately picked up her mobile phone. She briefly explained the situation to her brother Oak, including everything that had happened up until now. "This might be my limit." "I understand. I'm coming right now. Wait for me." Her brother's voice mixed anger with his usual calmness. The party continued as usual, family members chatting, a celebratory mood, birthday cake preparations. No one imagined that this glamorous gathering would soon be greatly shaken. An hour and a half later, the doorbell rang. When Oak appeared, the party venue fell silent. In his hand, dressed in an expensive suit, he held what appeared to be a heavy briefcase full of documents. The crystal chandelier light coldly illuminated the documents in Oak's hands. Known as a lawyer, his expression lacked its usual calmness. From the moment he learned of his sister's betrayal, his eyes had harbored flames of anger. His experience handling numerous real estate lawsuits as a partner at a downtown law firm was about to be put to use protecting his sister. Documents were spread one after another across the antique table. Confidential agreements with real estate development companies, print emails, bank transaction records, and detailed architectural plans. They all clearly told the story of this family's betrayal. The mountain of documents cast shadows on the table like accumulated lies. First, this is a copy of the contract signed last month. Oak pulled out one document. The contract date was 1 month ago. The contract amount was $500,000. The planned construction was for a 20-unit luxury condominium. The planned selling price for each unit was $1.5 million. The total projected sales would reach $30 million. In this large-scale project, the secret agreement with the developers also promised priority orders for Rowan's design firm, revealing the full scope of the backdoor dealings. And this is the record of the contract payment already made. $500,000 has already been transferred from the developer to Rowan's personal account. The bank statement cast a dull light on the table. The transaction date, sender name, and amount were highlighted in red marker. Wait, I can explain. This was for operating funds for the office. Rowan's voice trembled. His hand with the expensive watch also shook slightly. His usual confident demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and his face turned ashen. Well, this was all done thinking of the family, for a new life suited to modern times. Willow tried to smooth things over, but her voice had already lost its strength. Her new dress now only highlighted her anxiety. Her ringed fingers trembled slightly, and her true age began to show through her perfect makeup. Big brother, what about the promised new apartment? My share? You promised me the corner unit on the 5th floor. Dahlia cried out in a panic. Her voice contained not a trace of her previous arrogance. Her hands trembling as they gripped her smartphone, her latest brand name bag tumbled to the floor. Dahlia, be quiet! Rowan tried to stop his sister, but it was already too late. The details of the secret agreement were being revealed one after another. The promise of the top floor of the new building to his sister's family. The promise of $20,000 in monthly living expenses to Willow, and the fact that everything had been advanced while hiding it from Iris was all exposed to the light of day. The secret agreement with the developers, the family profit distribution plan, and the circumstances of Iris's exclusion, everything is clear. Furthermore, it has been discovered that this plan had been in preparation for more than 6 months. Oak's voice grew even more severe. He placed a new stack of documents on the desk. Email histories, meeting minutes, bank account opening records. The evidence was perfectly assembled. However, you all made a critical oversight. He pulled out a new document. Their parents' will. This solemn document had already been certified by the court. This will contain special provisions. It's as if our parents had foreseen this kind of situation. At that moment, tears glistened in Iris's eyes. Her parents' final love was trying to protect her. First, there's a clause requiring Iris's consent. This means that any sale or renovation cannot be executed without Iris's written consent. Second, there's a sale restriction clause. This stipulates that the property cannot be sold for 20 years without special circumstances. Third, there are penalty provisions for violations. These include the possibility of criminal charges in addition to civil damages. And fourth, there's a requirement for joint management between siblings. Any important decisions regarding this house require agreement between Iris and myself. Oak slowly read out each clause. Each word changed the color of the faces of those who had plotted against them. The document, filled with legal terminology, completely shattered their schemes. These provisions have full legal binding power under real estate law. In case of violation, they could be subject to criminal charges. Particularly regarding the contract money already received, I judge there is an extremely high possibility it meets the constituent requirements for fraud. Surely not. You intend to press charges? My position in society. Willow's expression changed dramatically. The blood drained from the face of the woman who prided herself as a flower of society. Her elegant afternoons at twice-weekly bridge club would now come to an end. "Iris, can't we resolve this through discussion? We're husband and wife, aren't we?" Rowan pleaded toward his wife. However, his eyes were fixed not on his wife, but on his own uncertain future. It was clear his reputation as an architect would be ruined by this incident. "It's too late." Iris's voice was surprisingly calm. Her attachment to the house inherited from her parents and all her dedicated efforts until now. These gave her strength. Though known for her mild temperament and patience, her expression now held strong determination. "Preparations for the lawsuit are already complete. The defendants will be Rowan Thompson, Willow Thompson, Dahlia Thompson, and the development company," Oak continued. On the desk lay the complaint that had already been prepared. "We are also considering reporting this to the police, particularly regarding the flow of the contract money. Investigating authorities will show strong interest, including suspicions of money laundering. Asset preservation procedures have already begun." The room's atmosphere grew even heavier. The decorations for the birthday party now took on an ironic tone. "And finally, my last warning." Oak stood up. His presence was exactly that of a formidable lawyer. Every word from him, earning over $300,000 annually, carried weight. "If there are any further illegal acts, we will take immediate legal action. Please vacate this house within 24 hours. Your belongings will be sorted later under my supervision." Those words were the final blow. Willow collapsed into her chair, tears spilling from her eyes, and Dahlia broke down, her sobs filling the silence. Rowan, stunned and speechless, stood frozen in the middle of the room. This was how the glamorous birthday party had ended an evening that was meant to celebrate, now torn apart by betrayal. On the table, the untouched dishes remained. The Wagyu roast beef, lobster bisque, and grilled seasonal vegetables Iris had meticulously prepared. The special order birthday cake, with its intricate design, sat there, maintaining its beauty, never once being cut. The expensive Bordeaux wine sat undisturbed, its cork never popped. Iris stood by the window, gazing out at the rose garden, the one place she had fought so hard to protect left to her by her parents. The evening breeze gently caressed her cheek, almost as if her parents were whispering encouragement to her. As she stood there, her reflection in the glass looked stronger than it ever had before. It wasn't just the garden that had changed. Something inside her had shifted. This could be the beginning of a new life, she thought, and as that idea settled in, a small light of hope sparked within her heart. 2 weeks later, Iris sat across from Oak in a sleek, glass-walled conference room at a top Boston law firm. The morning sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the divorce papers spread across the desk. It was in that moment that she realized how drastically her life was shifting. "This is the final proposal for property division." Iris's voice was steadier now, stronger than it had been before. While her calm demeanor remained, it was clear that she had found a new core of resilience. The documents detailed a comprehensive list of assets, each line representing the life she had worked so hard to build, now being divided. "Rowan's betrayal seems to run deeper than we imagined," Oak said, his voice tight with anger as he pulled out a new stack of documents. These were not just financial statements, they contained evidence of Rowan's past fraudulent transactions. Padded billing on development projects, under-the-table deals with clients, and even suspected tax evasion. Behind his polished career as an architect lay a web of illegal acts. "We've confirmed it. Just in the past 3 years, we've found 5 fraudulent cases," Oak continued, his frustration clear. The evidence came flooding in. Complaint emails from clients, suspicious deposit records, falsified design drawings. All of it painted a portrait of Rowan's true character. Meanwhile, the neighborhood had undergone a significant transformation. The scandal had quickly become the hottest topic in the upscale residential area. Willow's social standing had plummeted, and she had quietly stopped attending the twice-weekly bridge club. The elegant afternoons she once enjoyed where the wine flowed and the gossip was sweet were now a thing of the past. "New facts about Willow's past have also come to light," Oak continued as he tapped away on his tablet. The screen displayed a newspaper article from 10 years ago, detailing suspicions about Willow's inheritance from her previous husband. questionable insurance payments, conflicts with family members, and numerous financial troubles. This was not the first time she had been involved in dubious dealings. Mother-in-law was always this kind of person. Iris's voice was tinged with resignation, more than sadness. The life of luxury in the apartment, the facade of a brilliant reputation in society, it had all been for show. The fallout had reached Rowan's architectural firm as well. Major clients canceled one after another, new projects stalled, and employees continued to resign. The office was in disarray, struggling to maintain operations. His expensive watch was pawned, and his sharp suits began to look increasingly worn and shabby. Brother, about Dahlia, too. Iris handed Oak additional materials, which detailed disturbing revelations. False advertising on social media, the sale of counterfeit brand items, and multiple credit card frauds. The glamorous lifestyle Dahlia broadcasted to her 20,000 followers was a complete fabrication. The total debt far exceeds our initial estimates, Oak stated matter-of-factly. Dahlia's financial troubles had spiraled to over $1 million, with maxed-out credit cards, loans from shady sources, and compensation demands from fraudulent sales. Bankruptcy was now inevitable. Local media had picked up the story, spreading like wildfire. Family collapse of prominent architect, real estate fraud shakes upscale neighborhood. Social media buzzed with commentary, and the architectural industry was awash with criticism. Rowan's work opportunities had all but disappeared. The court has issued an asset preservation order, Oak added, sliding another official document across the desk. Rowan's assets were now frozen, and their ability to travel abroad had been restricted. One thick document, one final blow to their lavish lifestyle. Meanwhile, things were beginning to turn for Iris. Her family's 80-year-old Victorian mansion had found new value. The procedures to designate it as a historical landmark were progressing, and the neighborhood had started recognizing it as a significant piece of local history. It's becoming a model case for house preservation efforts, Oak reported happily. Support from local residents was strong, and it was drawing interest from younger generations. The precious place inherited from their parents was gaining new brilliance in a different form. There's one more thing to report. Oak pulled out the final document, a restraining order against Rowan and the others. This would prevent them from approaching Iris or the house. It was an important step marking the beginning of a new life. Quiet tears glistened in Iris's eyes. However, these weren't signs of weakness, they were proof of her determination and strength for her new life. Outside the window, Boston streets were full of vitality. Iris stood up and took a deep breath. In her expression, illuminated by the morning sun, there was no more hesitation. She would forge ahead with her life using her own strength. That determination shone strongly in her eyes. Before leaving the conference room, Iris picked up a photograph from the desk, an old family photo with her parents. She nodded slightly at her parents' gently smiling faces. What true family bonds mean, she had already found that answer. 1 year later, spring sunlight streamed into the old Victorian house in suburban Boston. Iris was quietly reflecting on the past days while tending to the roses in the garden. This year there seemed to be more blooms than last year. She smiled while touching the rosebuds. The rose garden inherited from her parents had now become known as a local attraction. It wasn't uncommon for neighborhood children to visit for tours on holidays. "Iris, coffee's ready," a voice called from the kitchen. It was her new friend, Lily. They had met through the local Historical Building Preservation Society, and now she often visited the house on weekends. "Thank you. I'll be right there." Iris removed her gardening gloves and brushed off the soil. In one corner of the garden stood a newly installed bench, a feature she had suggested to make the community garden more inviting. The idea had come from her deep appreciation for spaces that connected people, something she had long felt the need to cultivate. "The atmosphere of this house is really wonderful," Lily said, offering a cup of coffee. A homemade lemon cake sat on the antique table on the terrace, another of Iris's efforts to revive her mother's cherished recipes. "Hey, how's that book idea coming along?" Lily asked, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. Iris smiled, her cheeks tinged with a touch of shyness. She had recently started writing a book about preserving and revitalizing historical homes, a project that filled her with a quiet passion. "It's progressing little by little. I want many people to understand the value of old houses. Iris replied, her words carrying a sense of certainty. Work had been going well too. She had recently been promoted to department head at the accounting firm, a position that came with a significant salary increase. But more than that, her approach to work had changed. Her previously reserved demeanor had faded, replaced by the confidence to make bold proposals, to speak her mind without hesitation. Her phone rang, displaying her brother's name. "Iris, do you have time this afternoon?" Oak's voice was warm, his usual kindness evident. The sibling bond had deepened even further this year. They made sure to have family dinners at least once a month, cherishing their time together to share the details of their lives. "Yes, of course. I have tea prepared today, too," Iris responded, a smile tugging at her lips. After hanging up, Iris looked up at the sky. Spring clouds drifted slowly, painting the sky with soft hues of white. Meanwhile, the former family members were walking their separate paths. Rowan had his architect's license temporarily suspended and was working as a design assistant in a small town, having left behind his expensive suits and watches to live a modest life. All his glamorous connections had faded away. Willow had been completely expelled from society and had sunk into depression. She gave up her luxury apartment and now lived quietly in a suburban nursing home. The weekend bridge club and elegant tea parties were distant memories. Dahlia had gone through bankruptcy proceedings and now worked as a clerk at an apparel store in a provincial city. Her social media accounts had been deleted and her 20,000 followers were long gone. The luxurious life had vanished like a dream, replaced by days spent chasing debt repayment. "But they're all still alive," Iris whispered softly. There was no bitterness in her voice anymore. She no longer felt hatred or anger. Life, she had learned, always brings its consequences. The house renovations were steadily progressing. Modern facilities were being carefully installed, but every effort was made to preserve the historical charm. The old wooden stairs were lovingly repaired, and specialists were restoring the stained glass. The house was breathing new life, gaining back its brilliance, just as Iris had. "In about an hour, the children will be here for their tour," Lily said, glancing at the clock. Recently, Iris's house had been chosen as a field trip destination for local elementary schools. It had become a new role teaching children the importance of history. "Thanks to Iris, this neighborhood has changed too," Lily added, a note of pride in her voice. Indeed, the streetscape was evolving. Uncontrolled redevelopment had subsided, and town planning now focused on preserving and incorporating old buildings. Iris's house had become a symbol of this movement, proof that history could coexist with the present. "Perhaps what changed was myself," Iris answered quietly. Her mild and modest personality remained, but now there was an inner strength she hadn't had before. The experience of protecting the house her parents had left her had given her the confidence to fight for what she believed in. As twilight descended, Iris spoke to her parents' photograph on the mantel. "I'm happy, Mom and Dad. In this house, I found a new form of family." The photograph smiled gently back at her, as if they, too, were proud of how far she had come. Outside the window, the spring breeze swayed the rose petals. Tomorrow, the warm sunlight would stream into the house once again. Iris stood by the window, watching the setting sun. This, she realized, might be true happiness. Though the form of family might change, what truly mattered always remained in the heart. Gratitude for her parents, who had helped her realize this truth, filled her heart, alongside a quiet hope for her new life. What do you do when everything you've worked for is suddenly under threat, when the family you've devoted yourself to turns its back on you? Do you keep trying to hold it together, or do you finally stand up and take control? Iris Thompson's story is one of quiet strength, a woman who had spent her life dedicated to her family, her home, and her responsibilities. But when betrayal from her husband, Rowan, and his family turned her world upside down, she did what many wouldn't. She fought back. Despite the years of sacrifice, the countless hours spent tending to the garden, preparing meals, and maintaining her parents' legacy, Iris's husband and his family took everything she'd worked for and tried to leave her with nothing. They thought she was weak, just a quiet accountant with no backbone, but they underestimated her. When her brother Oak came to her aid, the truth came to light. The backdoor dealings, the secret contracts, the lies they'd woven to steal from her. Iris didn't just stand by and let them destroy everything her parents had worked for. Instead, she exposed the betrayal, wielding the legal protection her parents had left her with, and took back control of her life. It wasn't just about protecting the house. It was about protecting herself, her worth, and her future. As Rowan, Willow, and Dahlia faced the consequences of their actions, Iris stood stronger than ever before, not just as a wife or daughter, but as a woman who had reclaimed her own power. So, what do you think? Should Iris have just walked away from the family, or was fighting back the only choice? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a way that felt impossible? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
Kenzie, I've got this new app idea that's going to revolutionize everything, Jack declared, eyes glued to his phone. I laughed, placing a hand on his shoulder. Of course you do, Mr. Genius. Just don't forget to revolutionize our anniversary plans, too. Jack barely looked up. Yeah. Sorry, just one sec. Gotta reply to this email. As I watched him tap away, a twinge of unease crept in. Jack and I always celebrated our milestones grandly, and he was never this distracted before. I brushed off the thought, pushing the unease aside. Our lives were perfect. We had shared dreams, flourishing careers, and a bond that seemed unbreakable. Weeks passed, and Jack's absorption in his phone grew. He had become a fixture in his office late into the night. One evening, after returning from work, I found him still on his phone. "Dinner's ready," I called, setting the table. Jack mumbled something incoherent, still focused on his screen. I sighed, louder than intended. He finally looked up, offering a weak smile. "Just finishing up some work stuff." "More emails?" I couldn't hide the sarcasm in my voice. Jack sighed. "Kenzie, it's complicated. Just trust me." "Trust you?" "That's the thing, Jack. It's hard to trust someone who's always hiding behind a screen." He stood up, approaching the table. "I'm not hiding anything. Work's just demanding right now. We'll celebrate once things calm down." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. Something felt off, an undercurrent of tension I couldn't ignore. Another late night. I woke to an empty bed, Jack nowhere in sight. I tiptoed down the stairs, peeking into his home office. There he was, whispering into his phone. "Jack, it's almost midnight," I interrupted. He jumped, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Go back to sleep, Kenzie." Now my curiosity was piqued. "Who were you talking to?" "Just a client from another time zone. You know how it is." His tone was defensive, making my suspicion grow stronger. I crossed my arms. "Do I?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're overthinking this, Kenzie. Go to bed." Reluctantly I did, but the seeds of doubt were firmly planted. The next morning at breakfast, Jack barely touched his food. "Busy day?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yeah. Got a big project in the works. Sorry if I seem distant." The apology was half-hearted. "Maybe we should plan a weekend getaway," I suggested. "Could do us some good." He nodded absent-mindedly. "Sure, sounds nice." But his lack of enthusiasm was evident. Our seemingly perfect life was beginning to show cracks, and a gnawing feeling in my gut told me things were about to get worse. I decided to talk to Mia, my best friend, at lunch later that day. If anyone could offer perspective, it was her. Yet a part of me already knew I wasn't overthinking. The perfect illusion was crumbling, and buried beneath it lay truths that would soon unravel our lives. I met Mia at our usual lunch spot, a cozy cafe downtown. We ordered our usual chicken salad for me and a turkey club for her. As comfortable as our routine was, an uncomfortable feeling loomed over me. "Everything okay, Kenz?" Mia asked, taking a sip of her iced tea. "Jack's been acting strange. He's always on his phone, working late. It doesn't feel right." Mia gave me a sympathetic look. "Maybe it's just work stress. You know how demanding tech can be." "Maybe," I replied, though I wasn't convinced. Just then, my eyes caught a familiar figure outside the cafe window. Jack. He was standing close to a young woman, laughing, his arm around her waist. My heart sank. "Mia," I said sharply, interrupting her mid-sentence. "Look." She turned to follow my gaze and gasped. "Is that—" "Jack," I confirmed softly, "and he's not alone." We both watched as Jack leaned in to kiss the woman. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a work thing. It was something far more painful. Mia shook her head in disbelief. "Kenzie, I'm so sorry." I stood abruptly, determined to confront him. Mia grabbed my arm. "No, not here. Wait till you have him alone." Chomping down my initial impulse, I nodded. You're right, but that, I pointed out the window, isn't just anyone. That's Paige. Her eyes widened. My daughter Paige? No way. She's only 24. What the hell is going on? I wish I knew, I said through gritted teeth. I'll find out tonight. Dinner was a silent affair, tension hanging like a storm cloud. Jack poked at his food, clearly distracted. Who was she? I finally blurted out. Jack looked up, feigning confusion. Who? Don't who me. Paige, I saw you with her today. His face hardened. Kenzie, it's not what you think. Then what is it? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Jack pushed his chair back and stood up. Fine. You want the truth? Paige and I are seeing each other. It felt like the floor dropped from beneath me. You're seeing my best friend's daughter? How could you? I'm tired of this life, Jack snapped. I need something new, something exciting. Paige gives me that. I could barely breathe. So you destroy our life for what? A fling? It's more than a fling, he said coldly. I'm done pretending. I stood there, staring at a man I no longer recognized. The silence grew heavy until Jack muttered, I'm staying with Paige tonight. He walked out, leaving me in the ruins of our perfect life. The door slammed, and I broke down, feeling the sting of betrayal cut deep. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger tangled up with a girl half his age. This wasn't just an end, it was a beginning. The beginning of understanding just how deep this betrayal cut and where it would lead me next. I dialed my mother, Evelyn, the next morning, desperate for some sense of clarity. As soon as she picked up, I could barely keep the tears from spilling. Mom, I need to talk to you. Can you come over? Her voice was firm yet concerned. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When she arrived, I could see the worry etched on her face. Kenzie, what's going on? Jack's having an affair, I replied, trying to steady my voice. With Paige. Evelyn's eyes widened in shock. Paige? Mia's daughter? Yes, and he admitted he's leaving me for her. As if on cue, Mia called me. Kenzie, I heard everything. I'm coming over. We need to talk about this face to face. We all gathered in my living room. The tension was palpable. Mia was the first to break the silence. I never thought Paige could do something like this. She's my daughter. How could she betray you, betray us like this? It gets worse, I said. Jack's leaving me for her. He's tired of our life. Evelyn shook her head. Her usual calm rattled. We need to confront them. This can't go on. Before I could respond, the door opened, and in walked Jack and Paige, hand in hand. The audacity of it took my breath away. Well, looks like the party started without us, Paige sneered. How dare you? Mia shouted, stepping forward. You betrayed your own family. Paige shrugged, unfazed. It's not my fault you all are so boring. Jack wants excitement, and I can give him that. Jack stood there, silent but resolute. His presence was like a wall, indifferent and cold. Evelyn, Mia pleaded, say something, please. My mother took a deep breath. Paige, you've always been conniving, but this... I never thought you would stoop so low to destroy your own family. Paige rolled her eyes. Spare me the lecture, Grandma. This isn't about family. It's about what I want, and I'm getting it. You're tearing everything apart, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack finally spoke. We're not tearing anything apart that wasn't already broken. I'm done living a lie. So this is it? I asked, desperation clinging to my words. You're choosing this over us? That's right. Paige answered for him, pulling Jack closer. Get used to it. Evelyn stepped forward then. Paige, you're living off a trust fund that's about to run out. What happens when you're broke? Shock rippled across Paige's face, though she quickly masked it. We'll manage, right, Jack? Jack hesitated, the first sign of doubt crossing his face. Think long and hard, Jack, Evelyn continued. Is this really what you want? Jack's silence was deafening, the realization hitting him for the first time. As they turned to leave, the sense of finality settled in. But amidst the heartbreak, there was a small flicker of hope. It was the beginning of a plan, a way to regain control and ensure they would come to regret every single decision they had made. Evelyn and Mia stayed late into the evening, offering support and helping me regain some composure. The reality of my situation made it almost impossible to think clearly. Kenzie, you need to focus on yourself now, Evelyn said firmly, and figure out your next move. I will, but I can't just let them get away with this, I replied, the anger in my voice unmistakable. Mia nodded. We've got to hit them where it hurts. Paige's trust fund is almost gone, and Jack doesn't know that yet. The thought was sobering. I smiled slightly, a plan beginning to form. That's a start, and they'll be penniless soon. Over the next few days, I focused on my job, pouring all my energy into my work. Success would be my revenge. The drive to succeed, combined with the desire for payback, propelled me forward. Each day, the path became clearer. One evening, I needed to relive some of the tension, so I met up with Zoe, my closest friend since college, who worked as a private investigator. If anyone could help dig in deeper, it was her. "Zoe, I need your help," I said as we sat down in her office. She took a sip from her coffee and leaned forward. "Give me the details." "Jack's been cheating on me with Paige, Mia's daughter," I explained quickly. Zoe's brow furrowed. "That's messy. What do you want me to do?" "I need anything and everything you can find. Financials, secrets, there has to be something," I said resolutely. "You got it," Zoe replied, grabbing a notepad. "I'll get started right away." As Zoe began her investigation, I kept moving ahead. I filed for divorce and focused on climbing the ranks at work. Every success was a small victory, a step towards reclaiming my life. A few days later, Zoe called me. "Kenzie, I've got something. Meet me at the cafe." When I arrived, Zoe had a folder ready. "Jack's financials are tied up in risky investments, and Paige isn't as squeaky clean as she appears. She's run up a lot of debt, and without that trust fund, she's toast." I felt a grim satisfaction. "So they'll hit rock bottom soon." "Seems like it," Zoe confirmed. "They'll tear each other apart once the money runs dry." At home, I organized the documents and reports Zoe had given me. I would use every bit of this information to ensure they faced the consequences of their actions. Meanwhile, Jack and Paige's relationship started to deteriorate. The financial strain was taking its toll. I heard rumors of their arguments, and it was like a small beacon of justice. Each day, I grew closer to my goal. I could sense their downfall approaching. I would be there, ready to watch it unfold, a fitting end for their betrayal. I knew the time for a dramatic confrontation was nearing, and I was more prepared than ever to face it. The morning after filing for divorce, I felt a strange sense of liberation. It was like I'd cut away the final tether holding me to a life that no longer existed. Jack's reaction had been predictably indifferent when he received the papers. "Are you serious, Kenzie?" he'd said, briefly looking up from his phone. "Is this really necessary?" "You made it necessary. This is the consequence of your choices," I responded, my voice steady. He shook his head, scoffing as he walked away. His reluctance to acknowledge the gravity of the situation only fueled my resolve. Back in my office, I called Zoe. "Can you meet for lunch? I have an idea." At the cafe, we discussed ways to use the information she'd gathered. "Jack's partners need to know about his shady financials," Zoe suggested. "And Paige's debt. Let's start a little fire and watch it burn," I added. Zoe smirked. "I like the way you think." Over the next few weeks, block by block, I built my case. I discreetly provided Jack's partners with evidence of his risky investments. They started distancing themselves, and whispers of mismanagement circulated. Jack was too absorbed in his downward spiral with Paige to notice the backlash coming from his associates. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work. Late nights and hard-fought achievements raised my profile within the company. It wasn't just revenge, it was also about rebuilding my life, on my terms. One evening, on a whim, I called Jack. "We need to talk." He sounded suspicious. "About what?" "Meet me at our usual spot, the coffee shop," I said, and hung up before he could protest. When he arrived, he looked worn out, shadows under his eyes. "So what's this about? How are things with Paige?" I kept my tone neutral. Jack sighed. "It's complicated. Her trust fund, it's running out soon, isn't it?" His eyes widened. "You know about that?" "Of course I do, and the debt she's accumulated." I leaned in. "Jack, you left our stable life for this mess. Does she even know?" "Since when do you care?" he retorted, frowning. "I don't. I just want you to face the reality you've created," I said, standing up. "Good luck with that." Leaving him there, stunned, felt like a small victory. This was far from over. A few days later, Zoe called me, excitement in her voice. "Kenzie, I've got something big. Meet me at my office." When I arrived, she handed me another folder. More dirt on Paige. She's been stealing from Jack's business account to pay her debts. I couldn't help but smile. This is exactly what I needed. "Ready to pull the trigger?" Zoe asked, eyes gleaming. "Absolutely," I replied. Let's finish this. I returned home, preparing for the final stage. Jack and Paige were on the brink of ruin, and I was ready to give them the final push. Revenge was no longer just a desire. It was a certainty. And soon, they would face the full consequences of their betrayals. It wasn't long before Jack's world began to crumble. At first, I heard whispers at work about a big fallout between him and several investors. They were pulling out, leaving his latest project hanging by a thread. All the while I watched from a safe distance, quietly relishing each piece of news that slid my way. One night I was working late when my phone buzzed. It was Zoe. "You need to hear this, Kenzie. Jack just found out about Paige's secret debts. He is livid." "Where are they?" I asked, curiosity piqued. "They're holed up at their apartment. From what I've heard, things are getting heated." Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, a stronger part, needed to see the fallout firsthand. I grabbed my coat and drove to their place, staying out of sight but close enough to hear the raised voices echoing through the night. "Paige, what the hell? You spent how much?" Jack's voice was loud and filled with accusation. Paige fired back, equally loud. "Don't act like you're blameless. Your whole company is falling apart because of your bad decisions." Their words cut through the darkness, filled with venom. After a moment, there was a loud crash. Furniture, or maybe a thrown object. Jack burst out of the door, looking wild-eyed and frantic. I ducked behind a car, holding my breath. "Jack, come back here! We're not done!" Paige screamed from the doorway. "Done? We're done when I say we're done!" Jack shouted back, his voice echoing down the empty street. He got into his car and drove off, tires screeching. I followed at a safe distance, curiosity driving me forward. He arrived at my house, of all places. I stayed back, watching with a mix of satisfaction and curiosity as he banged on my door loudly. I waited a moment before stepping into the light. "Kenzie, please, I need to talk to you," he begged as I approached. "What is it, Jack?" I asked, my voice calm. "I can't go back there. It's a disaster. Everything's falling apart," he admitted, looking desperate. "I warned you about this," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know you did," he said, tears forming in his eyes. "I made a mistake. Please help me." I stared at him for a long moment, feeling a mixture of pity and triumph. "I can't help you. You chose this path." "Kenzie, please." He grabbed my arm, but I stepped back, pulling out my phone. "I think it's time I call the police. You're not thinking rationally." Jack's eyes widened, panic setting in. No, I'm leaving." Just as he turned to go, Paige appeared, wild-eyed and holding something metallic in her hand. "You're not going anywhere, Jack." I quickly dialed 911, explaining the situation as Paige assaulted Jack with a barrage of accusations. Moments later, the police arrived, diffusing the situation and taking Paige away. As the chaos finally settled, I watched Jack being led away in handcuffs. The public exposure, the scandal, it was all over the news by morning. My mother, Evelyn, and I shared a quiet moment, sipping coffee and taking in the headlines. Justice had been served, and I felt a profound sense of closure washing over me. The morning after the chaotic scene at my house, I woke up to my phone buzzing with notifications. News of Jack and Paige's tumultuous fallout had spread like wildfire. Headlines splashed their scandal across every platform. My inbox was flooded with messages from colleagues, friends, even acquaintances who hadn't contacted me in years. Each message was a reminder that the truth had finally surfaced. As I sipped my coffee, my phone rang again. It was Zoe. "Did you see the news?" "I have. Couldn't happen to a nicer couple, right?" I replied, unable to hide my satisfaction. "Reports say Paige has been arrested, and Jack's been detained for questioning. The whole thing looks bad for them." "Good," I said simply. "They deserve every bit of it." A knock on the door interrupted our call. "Hey, I have to go. Someone's at the door." Opening the door, I found myself face to face with two police officers. "Mackenzie Reed?" the taller officer asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied, heart pounding. "We're here in relation to the incident last night. We need to ask you a few questions." I stepped aside to let them in, memories of the chaos replaying in my mind. They asked about Jack's arrival, Paige's outburst, and my call to the police. I answered truthfully, every word bringing a strange sense of finality. After 30 minutes, they nodded and thanked me for my time. "The investigation will proceed," one officer said. "Jack and Paige will both face various charges. If you need any assistance, don't hesitate to reach out." Thank you, officers, I said as they left, closing the door and exhaling deeply. Evelyn joined me in the kitchen, having overheard the conversation. Looks like they're finally facing the consequences, she remarked, her voice steady. It's about time, I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The days that followed were surreal. Jack's professional life crumbled as investors and partners distanced themselves from the scandal. His misconduct became public knowledge, and the cracks in his pristine image grew deeper. At work, I was met with sympathetic glances and hushed conversations. Yet, I remained focused, using the chaos to fuel my determination. A week later, the police called again. Jack was officially charged with embezzlement, and Paige was facing multiple counts of fraud and assault. As I hung up the phone, a sense of closure settled over me. That evening, Evelyn and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. It's finally over, I said, feeling the release of tension. Yes, it is, she agreed, and you handled it all with incredible strength. As we sat in comfortable silence, a figure approached. It was Zoe, carrying a bottle of wine. Thought this called for a celebration, she said, smiling. Absolutely, I replied, grateful for my friends and family who stood by me. We toasted to new beginnings, the future bright and filled with possibilities. The nightmare was behind me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I looked forward with hope. Jack and Paige had met their reckoning, and I had emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever came next. The aftermath of Jack and Paige's downfall brought a strange calm to my life. It felt like everything that once weighed me down had been lifted. My focus shifted entirely to my career, and the rewards quickly followed. Promotions, recognition, everything started to fall into place. One afternoon, I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with a message from Mia. Let's catch up. Need to talk. We met at the same cafe where my suspicions had first been confirmed. Mia looked visibly drained but determined. Kenzie, thank you for everything. You handled this whole mess with such grace. I smiled, sipping my coffee. I couldn't have done it without you and Zoe. How's Paige? Her hearing is next month. She's been cut off and has to face the consequences alone, Mia said, sadness and resolution mixing in her voice. She made her choices, I replied softly. As the weeks turned into months, the legal proceedings took their toll on Jack and Paige. Jack made a few feeble attempts to contact me, but I blocked all his efforts. He was a chapter I was done reading, and I had no intention of going back. One evening, while working late again, a colleague, Mark Adams, knocked on my office door. Still here, Kenzie? Yeah, just wrapping things up. How about you? Same. Listen, I was thinking of grabbing a coffee. Care to join? There was something comforting about Mark. Reliable, kind, genuine. Sure, I could use a break. We walked to a nearby coffee shop, chatting about work, life, and everything in between. Mark's presence was a welcome change, a reminder that not all was tainted by my previous ordeal. Days turned into weeks, and our coffee breaks became more frequent. Mark's support was unwavering, wore a stark contrast to the deception I'd endured. One evening, as we walked back to the office, he stopped and turned to me. Kenzie, would you consider maybe dinner this weekend? It caught me off guard, but in a good way. I smiled. I'd like that, Mark. I'd like that a lot. Our dinner date was a turning point. Conversation flowed easily, laughter came naturally, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. Mark was different, steady, caring, and supportive in a way that Jack had never been. Months passed, and as my relationship with Mark blossomed, I finally felt the scars from Jack and Paige's betrayal start to heal. Closure wasn't a single moment, but a series of small victories, of new memories replacing old wounds. One evening, as Mark and I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he turned to me. Kenzie, I want you to know I'm here for the long haul. No games, no lies. I looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity. Thank you, Mark. That means more than you know. As the stars blinked into existence, I realized my life had come full circle. The chapters of betrayal and revenge were closed, replaced by hope and a genuine connection. With Mark by my side, I was ready to embrace the future, knowing that this time it was built on trust and mutual respect. I stared at Blake in disbelief as he knelt before me, holding out a sparkling diamond ring. Harper, will you make me the happiest man alive and marry me? My heart raced, and I felt a rush of excitement mixed with nervousness. This was all happening so fast, but I couldn't deny the love I felt for him. "Blake, this is so sudden." "Yes, I will." He slipped the ring onto my finger and we embraced, garnering applause from the other patrons of the high-end restaurant. In that moment, everything seemed perfect, like a fairy tale come true. Little did I know, the fairy tale was about to take a dark turn. A few days later, Blake and I were having dinner at his parents' lavish estate, where I would officially meet his family. I had heard stories about their wealth and influence, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety. As we sat down at the table, Blake's mother, Carolyn, fixed me with a scrutinizing gaze. "Harper, what's your highest level of education?" I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I graduated from a community college while my mom raised me alone." Carolyn's eyes narrowed, and she turned to my mother, Jennifer, who had accompanied me. "You raised her alone?" Jennifer nodded, her posture rigid. "Yes, I'm a single mother. I've worked hard to provide for Harper." Carolyn scoffed, and before I could react, she picked up her glass of wine and flung it at Jennifer, drenching her in the deep red liquid. "Mother, what are you doing?" Blake exclaimed, but Carolyn silenced him with a wave of her hand. "This engagement is over," she declared, her voice dripping with contempt. "Harper is not a suitable match for our family." I sat there, frozen in shock, as Carolyn and Blake's father, David, berated us, their words cutting deeper than any knife ever could. As Jennifer and I made our way out, I overheard Blake's voice from another room. "Compared to Harper, Melanie is perfect. Educated, well-connected, it's a no-brainer." My heart shattered into a million pieces, and a burning rage ignited within me. Without thinking, Jennifer and I burst back into the room, startling Blake and his family. "You'll regret this, Blake," I spat, my voice trembling with fury. "I'll make sure of it." Jennifer's eyes burned with determination as she added, "We'll ruin your precious family's company if it's the last thing we do." With those words, we stormed out, leaving behind a stunned silence. The fairy tale had ended, and a new chapter of revenge was about to begin. The next few days were a blur of anger and humiliation. I tried my best to maintain a professional demeanor at work, but every time I saw Blake, a wave of resentment washed over me. "Harper, can we just act professional?" he had the audacity to ask one day as we passed each other in the hallway. I fixed him with a withering glare. "Don't talk to me. Ever." His face fell, but I couldn't bring myself to care. He had shattered my heart, and his family had treated my mother and me like garbage. Meanwhile, Jennifer was on a warpath, determined to bring down the Turners at any cost. "We need everything on them," she told me one evening over the phone. "Financial records, emails, anything that could be used as leverage." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. They'll never see it coming. With a newfound sense of purpose, I started paying closer attention to Blake's behavior at work. I noticed him taking frequent calls in hushed tones, disappearing for hours at a time without explanation. And then there was Melanie, the woman he had chosen over me. She would strut around the office like she owned the place, always throwing me condescending looks whenever our paths crossed. One day, as I was working late, I overheard Melanie on the phone in the break room. "Don't worry, baby. I'll take care of everything. Harper is no threat to us." My blood boiled at the smug tone in her voice. She had no idea what was coming. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer and I meticulously gathered evidence of Blake's misdeeds. Financial statements that didn't add up, emails discussing shady business deals, even recordings of him bad-mouthing his own family. "They're going to pay for what they did to us," Jennifer said, her voice laced with determination. I nodded, my jaw clenched. The Turners had made a grave mistake in underestimating us. Their perfect little world was about to come crashing down around them. With our plan set in motion, Jennifer and I decided to pay one final visit to the Turners' estate under the guise of returning Blake's engagement ring. As we pulled up to the imposing gates, my heart was pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "Are you ready for this?" Jennifer asked, her expression steely. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. We rang the bell, and a few moments later, the gates swung open, allowing us to proceed up the winding driveway. As we approached the front door, it opened to reveal none other than Melanie, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit a stark contrast to our more modest attire. "Well, well, If it isn't the scorned ex-fiancé and her mom, she sneered, looking us up and down with disdain. Before I could respond, Carolyn's shrill voice echoed from inside. Who is it, Melanie? Just some unwanted guests, Melanie called back, her lips curling into a smug smile. Carolyn appeared in the doorway, her nose turned up in distaste. What are you doing here? I held up the ring box, my hand trembling slightly. I'm here to return the ring, Carolyn scoffed. Get out of my house. But I stood my ground, feeling a surge of confidence coursing through me. Not until you hear what I have to say. Melanie rolled her eyes. This should be good. Ignoring her jab, I pulled out my phone and hit play on the damning recordings we had gathered. Blake's voice filled the air, discussing shady business deals and misappropriation of company funds. Carolyn's face drained of color as she listened, her eyes widening in horror. Blake, what have you done? As if on cue, Blake himself appeared, his expression turning to one of panic when he saw us. Harper? Mom, what's going on? You tell us, son. David's gruff voice came from behind him. Care to explain these recordings? Blake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Melanie, however, found her voice. Blake, you assured me everything was above board. You lied to me. The tension in the air was palpable as the Turners turned on each other, accusations and insults flying back and forth. In the chaos, Jennifer leaned over and whispered in my ear, Their empire is crumbling, just as we planned. I allowed myself a small smile, feeling a sense of vindication wash over me. The Turners had brought this upon themselves, and now they were reaping what they had sown. Good riddance, I muttered, watching as Melanie stormed off, her perfect facade finally shattered. After the explosive confrontation at the Turners' estate, I expected Blake to slink away in shame, tail between his legs. Instead, he had the audacity to show up at the office the next day, acting as if nothing had happened. As I sat at my desk, trying to focus on work, I could feel his eyes boring into the back of my head. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. What do you want, Blake? I hissed, whirling around to face him. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. Harper, I know things got heated the other night, but can't we just move past it, for the sake of professionalism? I let out a humorless laugh. Professionalism, after everything you and your family put me through? Blake's expression hardened. That's ancient history. Melanie and I have moved on, and you should too. My blood boiled at the mention of his new fiancée, the woman he had chosen over me, only for her to turn on him when the truth came out. Don't you dare say her name in front of me, I spat. And don't think for a second that this is over. Your family's downfall is just beginning. Blake's eyes flashed with something akin to fear, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Harper. With that, he turned and sauntered away, leaving me seething. The nerve of that man, acting like he was untouchable. Over the next few weeks, Blake continued to pester me, sending me emails and leaving voicemails, all in the name of professionalism. Each time I deleted or ignored them, my hatred for him growing stronger by the day. Meanwhile, Jennifer and I were hard at work, gathering even more evidence of the Turners' misdeeds. Financial records, incriminating emails, you name it. We were building an airtight case against them, one that would ensure their empire crumbled to dust. And then there was Melanie. The woman who had once looked down her nose at me now seemed lost and adrift, her perfect life in tatters. Part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction at seeing her brought low, but mostly I just pitied her. She had been just as much a pawn in Blake's games as I had. As the weeks turned to months, the walls continued to close in on the Turners. Their once mighty company was hemorrhaging money and clients, and rumors of their shady dealings were beginning to circulate in the media. Through it all, I remained focused and professional, letting my work speak for itself. And whenever Blake tried to engage me, I shut him down with a withering glare or a curt "leave me alone." The time for words was over. Now, it was time for action. And Jennifer and I were ready to deliver the final blow that would bring the Turners to their knees. As the weeks passed, my determination to bring down the Turners only grew stronger. Jennifer and I spent countless hours poring over the evidence we'd gathered, looking for any weak spots in their armor. We need to hit them where it hurts the most, Jennifer said one evening, her brow furrowed in concentration. Their reputation, their finances, everything. I nodded in agreement. They'll regret the day they ever crossed us. Meanwhile, at the office, I couldn't help but notice Blake's behavior becoming increasingly erratic. He would disappear for hours at a time, only to return looking disheveled and stressed. I couldn't help but wonder what shady dealings he was up to now. One day, as I was leaving for the evening, I caught sight of Blake in a heated conversation with a man I didn't recognize. Their voices were hushed, but the tension was palpable. "You have to take care of this, Blake," the man hissed. "Your family's reputation is on the line." Blake ran a hand through his hair, his expression one of pure desperation. I know. Just give me a little more time." As they parted ways, Blake caught sight of me and froze, his eyes wide like a deer in headlights. Before he could say anything, I turned on my heel and walked away, my mind whirling with questions. What kind of trouble was Blake in now? And more importantly, how could I use it to my advantage? Over the next few days, I made it a point to keep a closer eye on Blake's comings and goings. I noticed him taking more and more clandestine meetings, always with different, shady-looking characters. It was clear that whatever he was involved in, it was deep and far-reaching, and if my hunch was correct, it could be the key to finally bringing down the entire Turner empire. As I shared my observations with Jennifer, her eyes lit up with a fierce determination. "We need to get to the bottom of this," she said, her voice steely. "No matter what it takes." And so we hatched a plan. We would tail Blake, document his every move, and gather as much evidence as possible about his secret dealings. It was a risky move, but one we were both willing to take. The first few times we followed him, it was relatively uneventful. Blake would meet with his associates, exchange hushed words and cryptic documents, and then go on his way. But then, one night, everything changed. We had been tailing Blake for hours, watching as he bounced from one seedy location to the next. Finally, he pulled up to a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. "This is it," Jennifer whispered, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I can feel it." We watched with bated breath as Blake slipped inside, disappearing into the shadows. After a few tense minutes, we decided to follow, our hearts pounding in our chests. What we saw inside that warehouse would change everything. After months of meticulous planning and gathering evidence, the time had finally come to confront Blake and his family head-on. With a deep breath, I steeled my nerves and rang the doorbell of the Turner estate, Jennifer by my side. The door swung open, and there stood Melanie, perfectly coiffed as always. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw us. Well, if it isn't the scorned ex and her mother," she sneered. "Come to beg for scraps." Before I could respond, Carolyn's shrill voice echoed from inside. "Who is it, Melanie?" "Just some unwanted guests," Melanie called back, her lips curling into a smug smile. Carolyn appeared in the doorway, her face twisting into a scowl. "You two have some nerve showing up here." I held up the ring box, my hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'm here to return the ring, Carolyn, and to settle some unfinished business." Carolyn scoffed. "Get out of my house before I call the authorities." But I stood my ground, feeling a surge of confidence wash over me. "Not until you hear what I have to say." Melanie rolled her eyes. This should be good. Ignoring her jab, I pulled out my phone and hit play on the damning recordings we had gathered. Blake's voice filled the air, discussing shady business deals and misappropriation of company funds. Carolyn's face drained of color as she listened, her eyes widening in horror. "Blake, what have you done?" As if on cue, Blake himself appeared, his expression turning to one of panic when he saw us. "Harper? Mom, what's going on?" "You tell us, son," David's gruff voice came from behind him. "Care to explain these recordings?" Blake opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Melanie, however, found her voice. "Blake, you assured me everything was above board. You lied to me." The tension in the air was palpable as the Turners turned on each other, accusations and insults flying back and forth. In the chaos, Jennifer leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Their empire is crumbling, just as we planned." I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The Turners had brought this upon themselves, and now they were reaping what they had sown. As Melanie stormed off in a huff, her perfect facade finally shattered, Blake rounded on me, his eyes blazing with fury. "You did this," he spat. "You and your mother have gone too far." I met his gaze unflinchingly. "No, Blake. You brought this on yourself with your lies and deceit. It's time to face the consequences." With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving the Turners to their imploding empire. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The fallout from our explosive confrontation at the Turner estate was swift and severe. Blake's family was in complete disarray, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. As the news of Blake's shady dealings and misuse of company funds hit the media, the Turners found themselves under intense scrutiny from the public and the authorities alike. Carolyn and David were forced to make a humiliating public statement, apologizing for their son's misdeeds and vowing to cooperate with any investigations. But even as their empire teetered on the brink of collapse, the Turners remained defiant, lashing out at anyone and everyone they could. Blake, in particular, seemed to have lost all sense of reason. "This is all your fault," he raged at me one day, as we crossed paths in the office. "You and your mother have destroyed everything." I met his gaze coolly, unfazed by his outburst. "We only exposed the truth, Blake. Your own actions did the rest." He let out a bitter laugh. "Truth? You have no idea what the truth is, Harper." Before I could respond, he leaned in close, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and desperation. "You think you've won, but this is far from over. I'll make sure you and your mother pay for what you've done." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to show any fear. "Is that a threat, Blake?" He stepped back, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Take it however you want, Harper. Just know that no one crosses me and gets away with it." With that ominous warning, he turned and stormed off, leaving me to wonder just how far he was willing to go to exact his revenge. In the days that followed, the Turner family's dirty laundry continued to be aired for all to see. It seemed like every day brought a new bombshell revelation, from shady business deals to illicit affairs and everything in between. And through it all, Blake remained defiant, refusing to take responsibility for his actions. Instead, he doubled down on his threats against me and my mother, making it clear that he wouldn't rest until he saw us suffer. But as the walls closed in on the Turners, a surprising ally emerged, Melanie, Blake's former fiancée. Scorned and betrayed by the man she thought she knew, she had no qualms about spilling every sordid detail of their relationship and Blake's misdeeds. "He lied to me from the start," she revealed in a tell-all interview. "I was just another pawn in his game, a means to an end." As Melanie's revelations hit the airwaves, the public's outrage towards Blake and his family reached a fever pitch. Protests erupted outside the Turner estate, with people demanding justice and accountability. And through it all, I remained steadfast, my resolve only strengthened by the knowledge that we were on the right side of this battle. Blake and his family had brought this reckoning upon themselves, and now they were facing the consequences of their actions. As the dust settled and the Turners' once mighty empire lay in ruins, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. We had fought for what was right, and in the end, the truth had prevailed. In the aftermath of the Turner family scandal, the fallout was swift and severe. Blake's father, David, was forced to resign from his position as CEO of the company, and Carolyn found herself ostracized from the social circles she once ruled with an iron fist. As for Blake himself, he faced a slew of legal troubles, with investigations into his shady business dealings and misuse of company funds. It was a humiliating downfall for someone who had once seemed so untouchable. Through it all, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. After months of meticulous planning and execution, our revenge had been achieved. The Turners' once mighty empire was in shambles, their reputation in tatters. "They got what they deserved," Jennifer said to me one evening, a satisfied smile on her face. "Their empire is crumbling, and it's all thanks to us." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. We had fought for justice, and in the end, the truth had prevailed. In the weeks that followed, I found myself adjusting to a new normal. The company I worked for had undergone a major restructuring in the wake of the Turner scandal, and I was transferred to a different department, far away from the toxic environment that had once surrounded Blake and his family. It was a fresh start, and one that I embraced wholeheartedly. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells and dealing with Blake's constant harassment. Instead, I was able to focus on my work and thrive in a supportive, positive environment. As for my personal life, I found myself taking a step back from the dating scene. After the betrayal I had experienced with Blake, I was wary of opening my heart too quickly. But deep down, I knew that one day, when the time was right, I would find someone who truly deserved my love and trust. In the meantime, I poured my energy into my career and my relationship with my mother. Jennifer and I had grown even closer through our shared ordeal, and we found strength in each other's support. "You're an inspiration, Harper," she told me one day, her eyes shining with pride. "You never gave up, even when the odds were stacked against us." I smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. We're a team, always." As the months passed, the Turner family scandal faded from the headlines, but the lessons I had learned would stay with me forever. I had seen firsthand the consequences of greed, deceit, and entitlement, and I vowed never to let those toxic traits take root in my own life. Instead, I focused on cultivating patience, discernment, and a strong moral compass. I knew that true happiness and fulfillment could only come from living an authentic, honest life, something that the Turners had clearly failed to grasp. And as for the future, well, the possibilities were endless. With the weight of revenge lifted from my shoulders, I felt free to pursue new opportunities and embrace whatever challenges life had in store. One thing was certain: I would never again let anyone underestimate me or treat me like a second-class citizen. The Turners had learned that lesson the hard way, and I was all the stronger for it. "Asher, we need to talk. Now." I stumbled in the doorway, the sharpness in his voice catching me off guard. "What's wrong? Did something happen at work?" He didn't look up, fingers fidgeting with his phone. "No, it's about us, about you." The tension grew thick in the living room of our suburban Chicago home. Asher and I had been married for 5 years, a seemingly perfect match after meeting at a corporate event. I walked over and sat next to him, trying to decipher the meaning in his words. "About me?" I echoed, confused. Asher finally looked at me, his eyes steely. "It's about kids, Harper. My parents, my mom especially. She keeps asking when we're going to have a child." My heart pounded. We'd talked about children in the abstract, but nothing concrete. "I know it's a sensitive topic, but we've only been trying for a year." He sighed heavily. "Mom says we should get fertility tests. She's worried it might be, well, you." I recoiled as if slapped. "Me? You think I'm the problem?" "It's not about blame," he lied, poorly concealing his own doubts. "We just need to know. For us." An awkward silence settled between us. My eyes stung with unshed tears. "So what, you think I should get tested?" Asher nodded, still not meeting my gaze. "It's for the best, Harper, just to be sure." I rose from the couch, feeling a mix of anger and vulnerability. "All right, I'll do it, but you have to get tested too." For the first time, he looked uneasy. "Why me?" "It's usually on the woman." "Because it's a partnership," I said firmly. "Both of us should know." He grumbled something under his breath, but didn't protest further. That night, our dinner was eaten in silence, the clinking of cutlery the only sound. Evelyn's disapproving voice echoed in my mind, always demanding, always critical. I couldn't shake off the memory of her last visit. "Harper, it's been 5 years," she had said over tea, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping the table. "Asher needs to be a father. It's his dream." Evelyn was relentless, her sharp words cutting deep. I had smiled politely, choking on the bitterness I couldn't express. After dinner, Asher retreated to his office, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Our once seamless bond now felt like a frayed rope, barely holding on. Days turned into a blur. Appointments were made, tests were taken. The waiting was torture, with every passing hour intensifying my anxiety. Then the results came. I was fine. Relief flooded, but was short-lived. "What about you, Asher?" I asked, hopeful for a shared sense of relief. He shrugged dismissively. "I'm sure I'm fine." "It's usually on the woman, Harper." His refusal spoke volumes. I realized then how deep his doubts ran, seeded and watered by his mother's cruelty. I began to observe him more closely, his indifference, his growing distance. Each day felt lonelier. The home we built turned cold. With Evelyn's voice haunting from afar and Asher's silence deafening, our shared life dissolved into an unsolved mystery. "Maybe you should see a specialist." "Just to be sure," Asher suggested nonchalantly one morning over breakfast. I've already scheduled a test. What about you? I asked, finding it hard to keep the irritation out of my voice. Why me? It's usually on the woman, he repeated, taking a sip of his coffee. My heart sank at his dismissive tone. I decided to focus on the task at hand, hoping that clear results would force a change in his attitude. A few weeks later, my test results came back. The results show no issues on my end, I told Asher, holding the paper out to him. He barely glanced at it. Okay, he muttered, turning back to his work, as if the matter was of little consequence now. Asher, you promised you'd get tested too, I reminded him, trying to rein in my frustration. So he waved me off. I'm sure it's fine, Harper. Let's drop it. Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn's verbal assaults grew sharper, digging deeper. One evening, at dinner with Asher and his parents, she couldn't contain her disdain. You are the reason my son can't fulfill his dream of being a father, Evelyn hissed, her voice dripping with venom as she poked her salad. It's not my fault, I snapped, taken aback by the acidity in her words. Asher could be the one with issues, but he won't listen. Asher remained silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. His passivity felt like a betrayal, deepening the chasm between us. In the car ride home, I broke the silence. Why didn't you defend me, Asher? Your mother blames me for everything. It's not that simple, he sighed. She's worried about us. No, I retorted. She's worried about you, not us. I'm getting tired of this, Asher. Asher's indifference hurt more with each passing day. I found myself increasingly isolated, documenting these painful interactions secretly. Through audio recordings, I captured the coldness in Asher's voice and the cruelty in Evelyn's words. I needed evidence, not just for myself but for any future decisions. One evening, needing clarity, I broached the topic of counseling. Asher, I think we need to see a therapist. He laughed, a sound void of humor. Therapist? You think we're that bad off? I do, I insisted. We need help, Asher. Nah, he shook his head. We're just going through a rough patch. Frustration boiled over, but I stayed calm. This isn't just a rough patch, Asher. We're falling apart. The arguments grew bitter, our once warm home filled with cold silence or angry shouts. Evelyn's relentless bullying cast a constant shadow, and Asher's indifference made it clear he had sided with his mother. My heart breaking a little more each day, I began considering legal separation. I wasn't ready to give up entirely, but I needed to protect myself. The evidence I gathered, emails, recordings, even witness statements from friends, gave me a sliver of control. Yet, despite my anger and hurt, I still held on to hope, a hope that something or someone might turn things around before it was too late. You are the reason my son can't fulfill his dream of being a father. Evelyn's words reverberated in my mind as I sat across from her during another strained family dinner. Evelyn, it's not my fault. Asher could be the one with issues, but he won't listen, I countered, my voice cracking. She narrowed her eyes. Don't you dare shift the blame. My son is perfectly fine. This is on you. Asher sat next to me, chewing his food slowly, looking anywhere but at us. Asher, I begged, please tell her. He sighed, putting his fork down. Mom, enough. Let's not do this now. Evelyn shot me a triumphant look, as if she had won another battle in her twisted campaign against me. I pushed my plate away, appetite lost. Later at home, I tried to talk to Asher about counseling again. We need help, Asher. We can't keep going like this. I don't need a therapist to tell me what's wrong, he muttered, and I don't need one to make excuses for you. Excuses? I was incredulous. You think everything's my fault? The tests were fine, remember? He said coldly. If anyone needs help, it's you. The distance between us grew wider with each passing day. Asher's hostility became more apparent, and I felt more isolated in our once loving home. One evening, desperate for a resolution, I proposed a weekend getaway to rekindle our relationship. Maybe some time away from everything will help, I suggested, hope lacing my voice. He chuckled bitterly. You think a vacation will fix this? He shook his head. There's nothing left to fix, Harper. It felt like a punch to the gut. Are you saying you don't want to try anymore? His silence was deafening. I started to gather more evidence of Asher's growing indifference and Evelyn's relentless bullying. Every recording, every email, every witness statement from friends, each piece felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. One day, after a particularly harsh argument, I confided in my friend Leah. I don't know how much longer I can do this, I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "You deserve better, Harper," Leah insisted. "You need to consider separating from him." "I've been thinking about it," I whispered, feeling a mixture of fear and relief at the thought. Asher's behaviors grew more unpredictable. He came home late more often, his excuses flimsy. One night I confronted him. "Where have you been?" "Out," he replied curtly. "Out where, Asher? You stink of alcohol." "Why do you care?" he slurred, stumbling past me. "We're barely even married anymore." His words cut deep, but they also strengthened my resolve. I wouldn't let him or his vile mother break me any further. I needed to protect myself. The next day I met with a lawyer. "I'm considering separation," I confessed, handing over my collected evidence. The lawyer nodded sympathetically. "Given what you've documented, Harper, you have a strong case for legal separation." As I walked out of the office, the weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to start taking steps to reclaim my life, even if it meant leaving Asher behind. "We're done, Harper. Here are the divorce papers." The words cut through the air like a knife. I looked up from my coffee, unable to hide my shock. "What? You're blaming me for something that's not even proven?" Asher pushed the papers across the table, his expression cold. "It's not just about the kids anymore. This isn't working." I stared at the papers, my world crumbling around me. "Asher, we can still fix this," I pleaded, my voice breaking. He shook his head. "No, Harper, it's over. I'm done." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You're making a mistake," I whispered. His eyes softened for a moment, but the coldness quickly returned. "Maybe," he said, turning to leave. "But it's my decision." I sat there, frozen, as he walked out the door. The sound of the car engine starting and then fading away left an eerie silence in the house. The divorce papers stared back at me, but I knew I couldn't just sit and wallow. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. "He served me the papers," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We'll respond accordingly," the lawyer reassured. "Remember, you have a strong case, Harper." I spent the next days gathering all the evidence I had meticulously collected. Emails, audio recordings, and statements from friends who had witnessed Asher's growing hostility. They were all meticulously organized. Each piece felt like a small victory. One evening I was going through some old emails when I found a particularly incriminating one. It was from Asher's mother, Evelyn, outlining how she had planned to blame me for our childlessness. "Make sure Harper meets with the specialist," the email read. "If she's the problem, we can pressure her. If not, we need to consider other options for Asher's happiness." I forwarded the email to my lawyer immediately. "This could be crucial," I wrote. Days turned into weeks as the legal wheels began to turn. Meanwhile, I started making plans to move out. I didn't want to be in the same house where every room held memories of a happier time that now seemed so distant. I broke the news to Leah over lunch. "I'm moving out," I said, pushing a salad around my plate. "I'm proud of you, Harper." Leah said, her eyes warm with support. "You deserve to start fresh." Packing my things felt surreal. Asher was distant, rarely coming home. The few times he did, he barely acknowledged me. I kept my interaction with him minimal, focusing instead on the text messages and legal updates. Finally, the day came. A moving truck idled outside, ready to take my things to a new apartment. As I took one last look around the house, Asher walked in. He paused, taking in the scene. "So, this is it," he said, his voice flat. "Yes, it is," I replied, meeting his eyes for what felt like the last time. "Goodbye, Asher." He nodded, saying nothing more. I walked out, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. As the truck pulled away, Leah called. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm better," I said, feeling a sense of relief. It's the start of something new. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was ready. With my friends by my side and the evidence strengthening my case, I felt a flicker of hope. It was time for a new beginning. "You deserve better," my friend Leah said warmly, handing me a box as we moved the last of my things into the new apartment. "Move forward, Harper. We're here with you." I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. "You're right. It's time to start anew." The apartment felt like a fresh slate, devoid of painful memories. I started my first day in a new marketing firm with a renewed sense of purpose. The team welcomed me warmly, and I quickly immersed myself in the work, finding it a welcome distraction. One evening, Leah convinced me to join her at the local gym. "Come on, Harper. Exercise is the best therapy, she insisted, dragging me out of the house. I hesitated, but eventually succumbed to her persistence. At the gym, we walked into a class led by Ian, a personal trainer with an infectious energy. His bright smile and encouraging words made the grueling workout almost bearable. "Hey, great job today!" Ian approached me as the class ended, handing me a bottle of water. "You've got potential." "Thanks," I replied, a little out of breath, but feeling good. I needed this. "Well, you're welcome to join us anytime," he said, his eyes kind and genuine. Over the next few weeks, I found myself looking forward to gym sessions. Ian's enthusiasm and sincerity were a breath of fresh air in my otherwise chaotic life. We started talking after each class, and he soon learned about my recent separation. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said one evening, sitting next to me on a bench. "But it's admirable how you're handling everything." "You've got to keep moving forward," I said, echoing Leah's earlier words. "Staying stuck doesn't help anyone." Ian nodded. "True, and for what it's worth, you seem like someone who deserves all the happiness in the world." We continued to see each other at the gym and eventually outside it as well. He invited me to dinner one night, and I agreed, feeling a flutter of excitement and nervousness. At the restaurant, he made me laugh, sharing stories from his childhood and his journey towards becoming a personal trainer. I realized how easy it was to talk to him, how natural it felt. "Thank you for tonight," I said as we walked back to my apartment. "It's been a while since I've had a good time." "I'm glad," he smiled. "You deserve many more good times, Harper." As the weeks turned into months, Ian and I grew closer. He became a beacon of support, cheering me on as I rebuilt my life piece by piece. With supportive friends like Leah and the warmth that Ian brought into my life, I felt stronger than ever. One weekend, Ian invited me to meet his friends at a small gathering. As we mingled, I couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. His friends welcomed me warmly, and Ian stayed by my side, ensuring I felt comfortable. "You're doing amazing, Harper," Leah said later that evening. "Look at how much you've grown, how happy you seem." "I feel like I'm finally moving forward," I admitted, smiling. "It's not easy, but it feels right." Leah squeezed my hand. "You've come so far, and we'll always be here for you, no matter what." As I looked around at my new apartment and thought of my new friends, I realized I was indeed starting a fresh chapter. It wasn't perfect, and it had its challenges, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about what the future might hold. "Wow, look at you glowing. Congrats on the baby news, Harper," Gabe exclaimed as he hugged me tightly. I smiled, feeling a mix of joy and anxiety. This company reunion was the first time I was seeing many of my old colleagues since the divorce. "Thanks, Gabe," I replied, patting my growing belly. Across the room, I spotted Ian chatting with a group of my former co-workers, his easygoing nature fitting right in. Just as I was about to walk over to him, I heard an all-too-familiar voice behind me. "Harper, pregnant? This must be a joke," Asher sneered, stepping into my view. I turned slowly, meeting his eyes with a steely resolve. "It's not a joke, Asher. I'm pregnant," he scoffed. "So you moved on pretty quickly, huh? Seems fitting." "Ian and I are happy together, and we're excited about this baby," I said calmly. Ian walked over, sensing the tension. "Everything all right, Harper?" "Yes, just clearing things up with Asher," I replied. "Asher, this is Ian." Ian extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, man." Ignoring the handshake, Asher's eyes wandered to my belly again. "So still think she's the problem?" he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Suddenly, Asher's current girlfriend, Taylor, appeared beside him. She looked between us, confused. "What's going on?" "Asher here is finding it hard to believe I'm pregnant," I explained, feeling a surge of boldness. "He always blamed me for our childlessness." Taylor's face paled. "Is that true, Asher?" Before he could answer, Ian spoke up. "You know, maybe it's time you looked in the mirror, Asher. Sometimes the answers aren't as obvious as we think." Asher's jaw clenched, and Taylor's eyes widened with realization. "You never took a fertility test, did you?" she asked him, her voice shaking with anger. Asher looked cornered, but he didn't answer. The crowd around us grew silent, whispers spreading like wildfire. "Harper isn't the problem, Asher," I said, feeling an unexpected wave of vindication. "Your refusal to consider that possibility cost us everything." Taylor turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving Asher standing there, seething. He glared at me one last time before following her. "This isn't over," he hissed as he walked away. Ian placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You handled that well," he said. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks," I sighed, the tension easing. It needed to be said. We finished the evening surrounded by supportive friends, sharing laughter and stories. As we walked out of the reunion, Ian held my hand. "You okay?" he asked, concern in his eyes. "Better than ever," I answered, a genuine smile tugging at my lips. Finally, it feels like I can truly move forward. Back in our apartment that night, I reflected on the evening. The showdown with Asher felt like a turning point. No longer a victim of his manipulations, I felt empowered and ready to embrace my new life with Ian and our baby. As I drifted off to sleep, Ian's arm around me, I felt a sense of peace. The future seemed bright, and for the first time in a long while, I was excited for what was to come. "This isn't fat, Asher. It's our baby," I said, my voice firm as I stared him down. Asher's face twisted in confusion. "What?" Ian stepped closer, putting an arm around me protectively. "So, still think she's the problem?" he said, looking Asher straight in the eye. Taylor, standing a few feet away, watched the exchange with wide eyes. "Is this true, Asher?" she asked, her voice trembling. Asher stammered, his usual composure collapsing under the weight of the truth. I don't know. I never thought." Taylor's eyes hardened. "You didn't think because you didn't want to know the truth. You selfishly assumed Harper was to blame." "Taylor, wait." Asher reached out, but she recoiled. "I can't believe I trusted you," she snapped. "You made me think Harper was the problem, and now you can't even face reality." The room seemed to hold its breath as Taylor turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Asher stood there, looking lost and humiliated. I took a deep breath, feeling years of pent-up frustration release. "You should get tested, Asher. It's time you stopped hiding from the truth." He glared at me, but didn't respond as he stormed off after Taylor, the crowd parting to let him through. The rest of the evening was a mixture of congratulations and support from friends and colleagues. Despite the drama, I felt a sense of closure, knowing I had finally confronted the man who had caused me so much pain. Back at our apartment, Ian and I settled into bed. "You were amazing tonight," he said, kissing my temple. "I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, feeling grateful for his unwavering support. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Asher had finally taken a fertility test. The news spread quickly. Asher was the one who was infertile. The revelation crushed him, and it seemed Evelyn could no longer ignore the truth. Evelyn paid me an unexpected visit one afternoon. She stood at my doorstep, looking older and more worn than I remembered. "I need to speak with you, Harper," she said, her voice strained. I let her in, curious about what she had to say. "I'm sorry," she began, sitting on the edge of the couch. "I was wrong to blame you. Asher," she trailed off, tears filling her eyes. "This is his fault." Her apology felt hollow after years of torment, but I nodded. "Thank you for saying that, Evelyn." "I've disowned him," she continued, her voice breaking. "I can't support his deceit." Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt pity. "I hope he finds a way to accept the truth," I said softly. Evelyn left quietly, leaving me with a mix of emotions. I knew I had to focus on my future, not the past. A few days later, Ian and I sat in the nursery, putting together a crib. "You know, he's going to have the best life," Ian mused, smiling at the thought of our baby. "And a wonderful father," I added, squeezing his hand. As we finished the crib, I looked around the room, filled with hope and love. My life had taken a turn I never expected, but I embraced it wholeheartedly. Ian pulled me close, resting his hand on my belly. "We've got this." For the first time in years, I believed it wholeheartedly. The painful chapters were closing, and new, beautiful ones lay ahead. "I have the family I always dreamed of," I said quietly, looking around our cozy living room filled with baby toys and soft light from the late afternoon sun. Ian smiled, his eyes filled with warmth as he held our baby boy Elijah in his arms. "And I'm the luckiest man to have you and our baby." The unexpected knock at the door broke the tranquil moment. I got up, curiosity piqued, and opened the door to find Asher standing there, looking disheveled. His presence was jarring, a ghost from a painful past now standing on my doorstep. "What do you want, Asher?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. "I need to talk," he muttered, shifting uncomfortably. "Please, just a few minutes." I hesitated but nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He looked around, taking in the warm, welcoming atmosphere of our home. Ian stood protectively near the baby, his expression guarded. "Make it quick, Asher," I said, crossing my arms. I need to apologize," Asher began, his voice shaky. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm so sorry for everything. Finding out I'm the one who's infertile, it destroyed me. Evelyn cut ties with me. Taylor left me." "I'm sorry you had to find out that way," I replied, feeling a mix of emotions. "But you treated me horribly, Asher. No apology can erase that." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know. I was a coward, and now I've lost everything. I just wanted to say sorry." "Thank you," I said, my voice softening slightly. "But this doesn't change the past." He nodded one last time, glancing at Ian, who held Elijah closer. "Take care of them," he said before turning and walking out the door. Asher's visit left me feeling unsettled, but also freed from the lingering shadows of our past. Ian came over, wrapping an arm around me. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay," I replied, leaning into him. "It's just a lot to process." The air in the room felt lighter after Asher's departure, and I could breathe a little easier. Elijah cooed in Ian's arms, and I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. Months passed, and life settled into a happy routine. Ian and I reveled in the joy of raising Elijah, our laughter filling the home. One sunny afternoon, we took Elijah to a nearby park, enjoying the simple pleasures of family life. As we sat on a bench, watching Elijah gurgle and reach for a butterfly, Ian turned to me. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" I nodded, tears of happiness in my eyes. "Yes, we have, and I wouldn't change a thing." "I'm so proud of you," Ian said, squeezing my hand. "You've shown so much strength and grace." "Thank you," I whispered. "I couldn't have done it without you." We watched Elijah play, content in the life we had built together. The memories of hurt and betrayal were still there, but they no longer held power over me. The future was bright, filled with endless possibilities and the love of my new family. As the sun began to set, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. The trials and tribulations of the past had forged a path to the happiness and contentment I now enjoyed. "Ian," I said softly, turning to face him. "Thank you for being my rock, my partner, my everything." He smiled, leaning in to kiss me gently. "Always, Harper. Always." And as we walked hand in hand, with Elijah giggling between us, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger and more united than ever. The shrill ringing of my phone jolted me awake from a deep slumber. Instinctively, I reached for it, squinting at the caller ID, Micah. A knot formed in my stomach as I answered, bracing myself for the worst. "Mom, I'm so sorry to call this late, but I need to ask you something important." Micah's voice trembled. "Can you please increase my allowance? Living on $10 a month is impossible." My heart sank as confusion washed over me. $10 a month? Micah, that can't be right. I've been depositing $200 every month into your account without fail. Silence hung heavy between us, punctuated only by Micah's shaky breaths. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I've been struggling to make ends meet, working odd jobs just to afford basic necessities." Guilt and determination surged within me. "Stay put, honey. I'll be right there." I ended the call and scrambled to get ready, my mind racing with unanswered questions. The drive to Micah's apartment seemed endless, each red light amplifying my worry. When I finally arrived, the sight that greeted me was gut-wrenching. My son, once vibrant and full of life, now appeared gaunt and hollow-eyed, his tiny studio apartment devoid of warmth. "Micah," I choked back tears, enveloping him in a tight embrace. "Why didn't you tell me things were this bad?" He clung to me, his body trembling. "I didn't want to burden you, Mom. You work so hard already." Anger bubbled up inside me, directed at whoever was responsible for this injustice. I immediately withdrew a substantial amount of cash from the nearest ATM, pressing it into Micah's hands. "This should tide you over for now. I promise we'll get to the bottom of this mess." As I held my son close, determination burned within me. Someone had betrayed our trust, and I would stop at nothing to uncover the truth and make things right again. After the initial shock of seeing Micah's living conditions, I wasted no time. We bundled up and drove straight to my place, my mind consumed with outrage and determination to solve this injustice. As soon as we stepped inside, I ushered Micah to the kitchen and whipped up a hearty meal. watching him devour it ravenously. Each mouthful seemed to breathe life back into his sunken cheeks, and a glimmer of hope flickered in his eyes. Once he'd finished, I poured us both a glass of water and sat across from him, steeling myself for the tough conversation ahead. Micah, I need you to tell me everything. When did you first notice something was off with your allowance? He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the table. A few months ago, the deposits just stopped coming. At first, I thought it might be a glitch or a missed payment, but when it kept happening, I knew something was seriously wrong. Anger coiled inside me like a viper, ready to strike. And you never thought to let me know? Honey, you should have come to me sooner. Micah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I didn't want to add to your stress, Mom. You work such long hours at the hospital. I thought I could handle it on my own, but... His voice cracked, and he buried his face in his hands. Instinctively, I reached across the table and gripped his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. It's gonna be okay, Micah. We'll figure this out together. He nodded, visibly trying to compose himself. I've been taking any job I can find, waiting tables, delivering food, even tutoring, but it's never enough to cover rent, utilities, and basic expenses. White-hot rage coursed through my veins at the thought of my son, my brilliant, hard-working son, being forced to sacrifice his education and well-being because of someone else's deceit. Pushing away from the table, I paced the kitchen, my mind racing. Micah, I want you to pack a bag and stay here with me until we resolve this mess. No arguments, I added firmly, cutting off his protests. And first thing tomorrow, I'm going to have a little chat with your father. The mere thought of confronting Jake twisted my stomach into knots, but I couldn't back down now. Not when my son's future was on the line. If Jake was behind this, he would face the full force of my wrath, and I wouldn't stop until justice was served. After ensuring Micah was settled in the guest room, I marched straight into the bedroom I shared with Jake, determination fueling my every step. He was lounging on the bed, mindlessly flipping through channels on the TV. Jake, we need to talk. Now. My tone brooked no argument. He glanced up, his brow furrowed in confusion. What's got you so riled up? I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my anger in check. Care to explain why our son has been living like a pauper for months while you've been pocketing the money I've been sending him? Jake's eyes widened, and he sat up straighter. Whoa, slow down. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, I snapped. Micah called me in tears tonight, saying he's been surviving on scraps because his allowance stopped coming through. A flicker of guilt crossed Jake's face before it hardened into a mask of indifference. So you finally gave him his allowance? About time. Don't forget next month. His cavalier attitude was like a slap in the face, and I saw red. What is wrong with you? Our son has been struggling to afford basic necessities, and you're acting like it's no big deal? Jake rolled his eyes, rising from the bed. Don't be so dramatic, Emma. He's a grown man. He can take care of himself. His dismissive tone ignited a fury within me I'd never experienced before. I stepped closer, jabbing a finger into his chest. This behavior is unacceptable, Jake. You're his father, for God's sake. How could you let this happen? For a moment, he seemed taken aback by my intensity. But then his expression contorted into a sneer that chilled me to the bone. Back off, Emma. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Before I could respond, my gaze fell upon a glittering object on the nightstand. A gaudy, decorative keychain I'd never seen before. A sick feeling settled in the pit of my stomach as I realized this keepsake didn't belong to either of us. Jake followed my line of sight and quickly snatched up the keychain, shoving it into his pocket. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. Where did you get that? I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Jake's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. It's nothing, just a little gift for myself. Lies. More lies. The betrayal stung like acid, searing through the very fabric of our marriage vows. In that moment, I knew. I couldn't trust a word that came out of his mouth. My husband, the man I'd loved and built a life with, was hiding something sinister, and I wouldn't rest until I uncovered every last sordid detail. The next morning, I woke up feeling drained and disoriented, as if the events of the previous night had been nothing more than a twisted nightmare. But the empty space beside me in bed was a harsh reminder that this was my new reality. Pushing aside the blankets, I padded into the living room, where Micah was already up, clutching a mug of coffee like a lifeline. "Morning, honey," I greeted, forcing a smile. "Did you sleep okay?" He nodded silently, his eyes haunted. We both knew there was an elephant in the room, a looming confrontation that could shatter what remained of our family. Swallowing hard, I reached for my phone. "I'm going to call your Uncle Mark. He works at the bank. Maybe he can shed some light on what's going on with your accounts." Relief washed over Micah's face, and he visibly relaxed. Mark had always been a steady, trustworthy presence in our lives, the polar opposite of his brother Jake. Within the hour, Mark arrived at our doorstep, pulling me into a comforting hug before greeting Micah warmly. "So, fill me in on what's happening," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. I launched into an explanation, laying out the facts as calmly as I could, but as the words tumbled out, anger and hurt seeped into my tone. Mark listened patiently, nodding along. "That doesn't sound like Jake at all," he mused. "Let me look into Micah's accounts and see if there are any discrepancies." While Mark made some calls, I busied myself in the kitchen, trying to keep my mind occupied. But it was no use. A nagging voice in the back of my head kept whispering that something was very, very wrong. Finally, Mark emerged, his expression grave. "Emma, you're not going to like this." My heart plummeted as he explained that there were, in fact, 2 accounts listed under Micah's name. A primary account that I was depositing into, and a secondary one that had been draining funds for months. "But how is that possible?" I demanded, struggling to make sense of it all. Mark's jaw tightened. "Jake set up the second account without your knowledge. He's been siphoning money from the primary into that separate fund." White-hot rage surged through me, quickly followed by a wave of icy betrayal. Jake had been lying to me all along, stealing from our own son for God knows what reason. "That bastard," I hissed, slamming my fist onto the counter. Micah flinched, his eyes wide with worry. Mark placed a calming hand on my shoulder. "I know this is a lot to take in, but we need to stay focused and get to the bottom of this." Taking a deep, steadying breath, I nodded. "You're right. Do you think we should hire a private investigator to dig deeper and find out what Jake's really been up to?" The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but I knew it was the only way. If Jake was leading a double life, I needed to uncover every last sordid detail, no matter how painful it might be. As Mark made arrangements, I pulled Micah aside, my heart aching for the turmoil he'd endured. "I'm so sorry you got caught up in this mess, honey," I murmured, cupping his face in my hands. "But I promise you, we're going to make things right. Your dad is going to face the consequences of his actions." Micah nodded solemnly, his eyes shining with a mixture of sadness and resolve. In that moment, I vowed to myself that I would stop at nothing to protect him, even if it meant unleashing the full force of my wrath on the man I once loved. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and anticipation as we waited for the private investigator to uncover Jake's secrets. The uneasy silence that lingered in our home was suffocating, punctuated only by the occasional reassuring squeeze of Micah's hand. Finally, the investigator requested to meet us, promising he had uncovered crucial information. Mark offered to join us for moral support, and we convened at a local diner, our nerves frayed. The investigator wasted no time getting to the point. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm afraid the news I have is disturbing, to say the least." My heart pounded in my ears as he continued. "Your husband, Jake, has been involved in an extramarital affair for quite some time now, with a woman named Sasha, nearly 15 years his junior." A collective gasp rippled through our group, but the investigator pressed on, his expression grim. "That's not all. It appears Jake has been funneling money, your son's allowance, to be precise, into a separate account, which he then used to lavish expensive gifts and nights out on this Sasha." My vision blurred with hot, angry tears as the pieces finally clicked into place. The secret bank account, the unexplained keepsake, Jake's hostility, it all made sense now. He had been cheating on me, stealing from our own child to fund his sordid double life. "That low-life scumbag," Mark snarled, his hands curled into tight fists. How could he do this to his own family? I opened my mouth to respond, but the words stuck in my throat, choked by the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Instead, I turned to Micah, who sat frozen in stunned silence, his face drained of color. Honey, I'm so sorry, I rasped, reaching across the table to grasp his hand. None of this is your fault. Micah blinked rapidly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I can't believe Dad would. How could he? His voice trailed off, and in that moment I felt a surge of white-hot rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Jake had not only shattered the sacred vows of our marriage, but had also inflicted unimaginable pain on our son, the one person who should have been able to trust him implicitly. Squeezing Micah's hand tightly, I turned to the investigator with a steely resolve. Thank you for your work on this. I know exactly what needs to be done now. As we stood to leave, Mark pulled me aside, his expression a mixture of concern and support. Emma, whatever you decide to do next, I've got your back. That snake doesn't deserve a shred of mercy after what he's put you both through. I nodded, my jaw set in grim determination. Jake's web of lies and deceit had finally been exposed, and there would be no escape from the reckoning that awaited him. It was time to gather our families and face him head-on, leaving no room for excuses or manipulation. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the chance to unleash the full force of my wrath and ensure that Jake faced the consequences of his despicable actions. And as Micah and I walked out into the warm afternoon sun, I silently vowed that justice would be served, no matter what it took. The air was thick with tension as our families gathered in the living room, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. Jake sat apart from the group, his face a mask of forced nonchalance that did little to conceal the anxiety simmering beneath the surface. As I paced before them, clutching the damning evidence in my trembling hands, an eerie hush fell over the room. All eyes were fixed on me, awaiting the bombshell I was about to drop. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. I've called you here today because it's time Jake's deceit and betrayal were brought to light. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, but a sharp look from my father quickly silenced them. Squaring my shoulders, I turned to face Jake head-on. Jake, you've been having an affair with a woman named Sasha, and to fund your sordid little tryst, you've been stealing from our son, Micah, embezzling the money I've been sending him for his allowance and living expenses. The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, Jake's expression remained impassive. But then, his mask began to crack, twisting into a sneer of defiance. You've got no proof of any of that, he spat, his eyes darting around the room as if seeking an ally. But I was ready, brandishing the stack of evidence like a weapon. Oh, but I do. Bank statements, receipts for expensive gifts and hotel stays, all traced back to you and your little mistress. Jake's face drained of color as I methodically laid out every sordid detail, leaving no room for doubt or excuses. Beside me, Micah sat rigid, his hands clenched into tight fists as the full extent of his father's betrayal sank in. As the last damning piece of evidence was revealed, a hush fell over the room, punctuated only by the sound of Jake's ragged breathing. It was as if the air had been sucked out, leaving us all gasping for oxygen in the wake of such staggering deception. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A petite woman with heavily made-up features slinking towards the center of the room. Sasha, the woman who had so callously inserted herself into our lives and torn our family apart. Well, it seems the jig is up, she purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she sidled up to Jake. Did you really think you could keep me a secret forever, darling? Jake recoiled from her touch, his face contorted in a mixture of anger and shame. Sasha, what are you doing here? But she merely laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that sent shivers down my spine. Oh, Jake, you're just too easy. Did you really think I loved you? That this was anything more than a means to an end? The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my mother's muffled sobs. Jake sat frozen, his mouth hanging open in a twisted parody of shock and anguish. You used me? He croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sasha rolled her eyes, examining her perfectly manicured nails with a bored expression. Of course I did, you idiot. Did you really think a woman like me would settle for a pathetic loser like you if there wasn't something in it for me? Her words cut deeper than any knife, and I could see the fight draining from Jake's body with every venomous syllable. In that moment, he was utterly broken. a shell of the man I had once loved, stripped bare by the very woman he had sacrificed everything for. As Sasha sauntered out, leaving a trail of devastation in her wake, an eerie silence descended upon the room. Jake remained motionless, his gaze fixed on some distant point as the weight of his actions finally came crashing down around him. It was over. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no turning back. All that remained was to pick up the pieces and begin the long, arduous process of healing. A journey that would test the limits of our strength and resolve, but one that we would undertake together, united in our determination to overcome the betrayal that had nearly torn us apart. The silence that hung in the air was suffocating, broken only by the occasional muffled sob or sharp intake of breath. Jake sat hunched in his chair, his head cradled in his hands as the full weight of his deception bore down upon him. Beside me, Micah shifted uncomfortably, his jaw clenched tight as he struggled to process the avalanche of revelations. I reached out and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, drawing strength from his presence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake lifted his head, his eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "Emma, His voice cracked and he swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say." The apology died on his lips as my father abruptly rose from his seat, his face thunderous. "Save it, Jake," he growled. "Your actions speak louder than any words ever could." Jake flinched as if he'd been physically struck, his gaze dropping to the floor in shame. Seizing the opportunity, I stepped forward, unfurling the divorce papers I'd had drawn up. "These are standard divorce proceedings," I stated, my tone clipped and businesslike. "You'll also be responsible for compensating Micah for the full amount you embezzled from his accounts, plus interest." A collective murmur rippled through the room, but I held up a hand, silencing them. "I'm also seeking additional damages for the emotional turmoil and distress you've put us through." Jake's head snapped up, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Emma, you can't be serious." But I was deadly serious. This man, this stranger who had once been my husband, had shattered our family's trust in the most despicable way imaginable. He deserved no mercy, no second chances. "Sign the papers, Jake," I said, my voice laced with steel. "It's the only way to begin making amends for what you've done." For a long moment he simply stared at me, as if willing me to back down or offer him a lifeline. But when none came, his shoulders slumped in defeat. With trembling hands he reached for the pen and scrawled his signature across the dotted line, sealing his fate. As the papers were shuffled and handed off to my lawyer, a heavy silence descended upon the room once more. Jake remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor as the weight of his actions finally sank in. It was then that a commotion erupted from the hallway, the unmistakable sounds of angry shouting and scuffling. Before anyone could react, Sasha burst through the door, her perfectly coiffed hair in disarray and makeup smeared. "You lying, cheating scumbag," she screeched, her eyes wild and accusing as she zeroed in on Jake. "You told me you were some hotshot CEO, not some washed-up loser living off his wife's income." Jake recoiled as if he'd been struck, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly as Sasha advanced on him, her manicured nails bared like claws. "I can't believe I let you touch me, let alone waste my time and money on you," she spat, her words dripping with venom. "You're nothing but a pathetic, spineless excuse for a man." With each blistering insult, Jake seemed to shrink further into himself, his facade of bravado crumbling under the onslaught of Sasha's fury. As the rest of us looked on in stunned silence, Sasha whirled on her heel and stormed out, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. Jake remained frozen, his eyes glassy and unfocused, as if he'd finally glimpsed the depths of his own depravity. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of pity wash over me. This broken, pathetic shell of a man was barely recognizable as the person I had once loved and built a life with. His betrayal had been unforgivable, but in the end, he was the architect of his own downfall. A cautionary tale of what happens when greed and lust are allowed to fester unchecked. As my family members began to disperse, offering murmured words of support and consolation, I turned to Micah, my heart swelling with a renewed sense of purpose. "It's over," I said softly, brushing a stray tear from his cheek. "Your dad's lies and deceit have finally caught up to him. Now it's time for us to start fresh, to rebuild and move forward, stronger than ever before." Micah nodded, his expression a mix of sadness and determination. We had endured the unimaginable, but our bond had only grown stronger in the face of such adversity. As we turned and walked out into the crisp evening air, I knew that while the road ahead would be long and challenging, we would tackle it together, side by side, a united front, forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by an unshakable resilience that no force on earth could break. In the weeks that followed, Jake's world unraveled at a dizzying pace. The fallout from his sordid affair and financial misdeeds proved to be a maelstrom from which there was no escape. My lawyer wasted no time in pursuing the compensation and damages outlined in the divorce papers. With irrefutable evidence of his embezzlement and betrayal, Jake had no choice but to comply, a fact that left him seething with impotent rage. "This is highway robbery," he raged one day, slamming his fist on the table as we finalized the transfer of funds to cover Micah's losses. "You're bleeding me dry, Emma." I leveled him with an icy glare, unfazed by his outburst. "You brought this on yourself, Jake? Consider this a mere fraction of the price you'll pay for your despicable actions." His face flushed an ugly shade of crimson, but he knew better than to argue. With each dollar he was forced to relinquish, I could see the fight draining from his eyes, replaced by a weary resignation. As if the financial burden wasn't enough, Jake's professional life soon crumbled as well. News of his infidelity and fraudulent activities quickly spread through the company grapevine, and before long he found himself unceremoniously dismissed. A disgraced pariah in the industry he had once thrived in. "They can't do this to me," he blustered, pacing the living room in a frenzy. "I built that company from the ground up. Those ungrateful bastards owe me." But his protests fell on deaf ears. The corporate world had no tolerance for the kind of moral bankruptcy he had displayed, and he soon found himself blacklisted, his once promising career reduced to ashes. As Jake's life spiraled further into disarray, Sasha wasted no time in cutting her losses and fleeing town, her appetite for drama and chaos finally sated. But not before my legal team ensured she faced the consequences of her actions, too. "You really thought you could just waltz in, ruin my family, and walk away scot-free?" I challenged her during one particularly heated confrontation. Sasha merely shrugged, examining her perfectly manicured nails with a bored expression. "It was fun while it lasted, I guess. But Jake was never really my type. Too clingy, too desperate." Her callous indifference was maddening, but I refused to let her get under my skin. "Well, I hope you enjoyed your little game, because you're about to pay the price." True to my word, Sasha found herself embroiled in a legal quagmire that left her finances in tatters. Any ill-gotten gains she had acquired through her dalliance with Jake were swiftly clawed back, leaving her to slink away in disgrace, her reputation in ruins. As the dust settled and a sense of normalcy began to return, I found myself reflecting on the tumultuous journey that had brought us to this point. The road had been paved with heartbreak and betrayal, but we had emerged from the flames tempered and stronger than ever before. Micah, in particular, seemed to thrive in the aftermath of his father's downfall. With the financial burden lifted and a renewed sense of purpose, he poured himself into his studies, ultimately landing a coveted job at a prestigious firm upon graduation. As for me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had stared down the face of adversity and emerged victorious, my unwavering determination to protect my family proving to be an unbreakable force. And yet, amid the triumphs and hard-won victories, there was still a lingering ache, a reminder of the love and trust that had been so callously shattered. Jake's actions had left scars that would never fully heal, a constant reminder of the fragility of the bonds we once thought unbreakable. But as I watched Micah thriving in his new life, surrounded by a supportive network of friends and colleagues, I knew that we had weathered the storm. We had faced the darkness head-on and emerged into the light, our resilience and love for one another shining brighter than ever before. And in that moment, I silently vowed to never lose sight of the hard-won wisdom we had gained. That true strength lies not in the absence of adversity, but in the courage to face it head-on and emerge stronger on the other side.